You mentioned Star Wars again just now. Being the same age, I grew up with Star Wars. I remember going to see Empire Strikes Back in the theater and all these things. And I was watching Mandalorian. And the first season of Mandalorian I didn't love so much, but the second season really started to pick up. And without ruining it, by the end of Mandalorian, it was like the most fun I had had watching Star Wars in years. And no spoilers here, but it really tied like decades worth of my life together. And is that sad to say? I don't know, but it definitely did. But now, Dave, what are you going to do? I am faced with a quandary. Right. I was a fan of Gina Carano back before she was ever in the UFC because I'm a Muay Thai fighter, an amateur fighter. And I remember her coming up as a Muay Thai fighter, and it was fun to watch her. And then they started priming her to go into the UFC. So I've tracked her career all through this. And now that they've banned her for saying something that wasn't even offensive in the slightest, what are you going to do with Star Wars, Dave?
Yeah, well, first, let's hit the last part there. What she said was not offensive. And if you are offended by what she said, you really have to think about what your philosophy is related to life. In essence, what she was saying is the way we are demonizing the other, in this case, conservative or pretty much anyone non-woke, is similar to the way that the Germans demonized the Jews before the Holocaust. She didn't, considering all of these people run around calling all of us Nazis all day long and calling everyone else Hitler, you would think that they would have a little leeway when it comes to making Nazi references, right? They're the ones, of course, doing things that are far more in line, or at least using the line of thought that is far more in line with Nazi style thinking, centralized power and collectivist thinking. So just to be very, very clear, she did absolutely nothing wrong. I 100% stand with her. I look forward to chatting with her, and I like her work and all that good stuff. As far as Star Wars, you bring up an interesting point, and I'm glad we're starting there because this isn't really about Star Wars, but at some level, you're right. What Mandalorian did finally by the end, because I didn't love the first season either, was they started tying things together. Oh, and these are decades of our life. So you were born in 76, I assume, just like me. We graduated the same year. And for those of us that are Gen X right now, it's like we're hitting what should be the prime of our lives right now, right? We're not in our 20s anymore when you're still figuring it out. 30s, you could be figuring out. We're in our 40s, let's say early 50s or late 30s, like that nice 20-year run that you have in life when you're physically still able to do stuff, you're mentally sharp, you want to work, you want to build, all of those things. What's interesting in the world right now is that the world is being run by, look, even Trump, who obviously I came to like, 74 years old, Joe Biden, 78. Chuck Schumer, late 70s. Nancy Pelosi is like, 80, 104, and Feinstein's 1,000. I mean, the world has just sort of allowed people that are too old to hang on. And the reason this is relevant to Star Wars and all of this is that we need new stories. We really, really need new stories. When I watched that last Avengers movie, Endgame, by the end, although I really enjoyed the movie, and I thought Infinity War was particularly good, but by the end, it felt gross. It was just like, oh, we've been at an all-day orgy with the Avengers, and every story has just basically came all over itself. That's sort of where we're at, that we actually need new stories. And what I liked about Mandalorian by the end is they were able to sort of wrap something up, but we either need new characters, this would be a very Jordan Peterson take on things like, biblical stories provide sort of eternal lessons, but, we don't just need biblical stories. We also need art. We need science fiction. We need these things, and we need new things. I would say the one caveat to that is, did you watch Cobra Kai by any chance?
Funny you should ask. I'm a big fan of Karate Kid, watched the movies over and over again. I remember rewinding my VCR back to the point at which the tournament started 50,000 times. I just watched it again with my kids just the other night, 8, 14, 15. They're like, wow, this is incredible. I even choked up at the end again, just because it connected me to my childhood in a very powerfully nostalgic way. I gave Cobra Kai a shot. Maybe I wasn't warned enough in advance of like how campy it was supposed to be, because I was watching it thinking, what is this nonsense?
Oh, I'm shocked, man. Wait, how many episodes in did you get?
Just one. I made it through one episode.
Listen, trust me, just give it 2 or 3 episodes, because what they do in Cobra Kai, and yes, it's campy and it's silly and it's self-referential and all of these things, But they do such a great twist on what good and evil is, and how they go into the backstory in a way that lets you realize that bad guys were once good guys and good guys were once bad guys. They do a lot of the stuff that turned the last 3 Star Wars movies into such trash because there was no sensible continuum throughout. But all of this I say because what am I going to do with Star Wars? Well, I tweeted that I was going to cancel my Disney account. I had to clean it up because my sister also had my account. Could I be in trouble now? And she's got 2 young kids, and I didn't want to boot the kids off Moana or whatever they're watching on there. But yes, I literally just texted her yesterday saying it's being canceled. And that's the only thing we can do. Why would you pay? Why would you pay the people who are trying to destroy the world that you want to live in? And I know that sounds sort of over the top or something, but that is the truth. If every time you turn on PlayStation and they offer you a Black Lives Matter free background, if that's not in line with what you believe, if every time you open up Uber Eats, go to Black-owned businesses, you're not going to believe this, Jack. I don't care whether the guy who makes my chicken sandwich or my smoothie is black or white. I don't care. But it's the anti-racists who are now the racists, and that concept has now been infiltrated completely into our institutions. And by the way, Disney, which owns pretty much everything, is a massive institution. So I know that my $5.99 a month or whatever it is isn't anything in the scheme of things, but me saying this probably has a little value, and maybe some other people will cancel as well. And I just hope we will find better stories. And by the way, there are better stories out there, even related to the properties that exist, because you can go on YouTube and find fan things from Star Wars that are way better than any of the crap that Kathleen Kennedy and the Disney monolith is coming out with.
Jon Favreau involved in both of those productions, Mandalorian and the Avengers as well. And by the end of the Avengers, I respected it for the body of work. Man,
yeah,
that was impressive, right? But I'm over it. But interesting to note, the superhero archetype, it played well. It played well in a day in which the traditional masculine hero, the He-Man. I mentioned He-Man to my girlfriend earlier this morning. She's a little bit younger than me, and she's like, "What's He-Man?
What's a He-Man?
What's a
Come
He-Man?
on, man! Skeletor, Merman, Beastman,
Exactly.
Man-at-Arms, Tila, Castle Grayskull."
All of these. I tell you, dude, we grew up at the exact same time, watched all the same shows, I'm sure. But He-Man. It's funny that she didn't even know what that was, but. The Avenger archetype, the hero archetype, it seemed to play well, which doesn't necessarily jive with a lot of this cultural stuff that we're talking about, right? Like demasculinization and the flattening of everybody and blurring of boundaries and everybody's a superhero and all that. It did strike me as actually a little anachronistic for our time, but still welcomed. I wonder if they're gonna, if that genre is dead. Is there gonna be a new hero, a new type of art? Like, what is your vision for art that reflects our values? I mean, that's a great question. Who's attacking that,
It is a great question. You asked the question and also said that it was a great question. That's a fine move by an interviewer. That was pretty good right there. I know a little something about interviewing. I think that was pretty good. No, it really is a great question though, because you're right. And what it feels like is happening right now with the entire world, with lockdowns, with our political craziness, everything, is that it does feel like we're at the end of a certain stage, that the internet over the last 20 years accelerated the end of a certain way of looking at the world. Now, what's happening is with the woke crew is they just want to burn the whole thing down. They think that everyone that came before them is a bigot or evil or racist or homophobic or something. And they refuse to acknowledge that anything good has happened. And I would say in the case of America, something extraordinarily good has happened that has offered more freedoms to everyone from across the world than any other place could have ever been imagined before America existed. We need these news stories. And the problem is that you just referenced this. I have no problem with Jon Favreau. I think he's a good guy and he's done some nice work. But the fact that he does Marvel, Iron Man, Avengers, and Star Wars, and both of those things are owned by a giant corporation called Disney. Our dreams are now owned by corporations that would be the bad guys in the Disney movies, right? You saw the Disney movie Robots. Remember that one from 20 years ago? The bad guy in effect was Disney. Or if you think of WALL-E, that we all become these fat, pathetic blobs that live just to watch things on screens and play. I mean, it's literally happening right now. They're trying to lock us in our house, say, stay online all day, go to Zoom school. And by the way, if you say certain things, we're not even going to give you access to the screens or to the ability to communicate and everything else. So in many ways, the corporations have now become the very thing that they used to mock. So
Indeed.
we need new stories. The question is, it's like, well, think about it this way. When was the last time you heard a new musician that you really love? Like some new music that you really love? I don't know when the last time was for me. I mean, I listen to, if you look at my Spotify playlist, I listen to a lot of Frank Sinatra. I listen to a lot of Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. I do a lot of ambient electronica. I like that kind of stuff. But like, when's the last, a great painter, a great pianist, whatever it might be, it's like, it's been a while. We have to figure these things out. And as far as the movie part of it, it's like, yeah, if everything has to go through those giant studios, how can they ever give us anything real? How can the people who push wokeism on us, who push collectivism on us, how can they ever give us art that celebrates the individual, which I think is what true art really does? And I don't think they can do it. And that's why we're at this very intractable place right now.
Interesting. So many things just came to mind. Art, in my lifetime, I think of art as dissident, as counterculture, as critiquing the establishment. But interestingly enough, art throughout most of history was there to reinforce the establishment, right? You have pictures of saints and Jesus and Mary and all of your murals and statues to your leaders and all these things. So art was controlled by the establishment. You needed patrons to fund it. It reflected establishment values. It wasn't necessarily dissident. It wasn't, in fact, at all dissident. In fact, it was part of the empire. Right. Beautiful, amazing stuff, but still part of pushing the establishment and strengthening their control. But in my lifetime, art was dissident. It was punk rock. It was how you criticize the government, how you express yourself in a way that couldn't be expressed otherwise. But it feels like now art has been re-co-opted by the corporations, which is truly like the end of a life cycle for any subcultures when it gets co-opted by the corporations. And now the corporations are all in unison and controlling our dreams and controlling our childhoods. And let's not forget, it's not just that it all goes through one corporation now. In the case of Hollywood, it also goes across the Pacific through the CCP and then back here to the United States with the stamp of approval of literal communists, like literally communists, stamping our art for consumption in America.
Listen, not that I'm going to tell you that the Transformers movies by Michael Bay were art, because I'm not completely psychotic. Those were horrible movies, which also sort of wrecked something of our childhood, right?
Indeed,
the original Amazing Transformers, which if anyone is a Transformers fan, you should go back and watch the original cartoon Transformers movie of 1985, which is edgy and real, and the soundtrack is amazing and all that stuff. But remember, what were there were I think 5 of the Transformer movies plus Bumblebee. I mean, each one got progressively worse, but the one which I think was number 4, where they take them to China and they had all these Chinese actors and all this stuff. I don't have a problem with Chinese actors. Obviously, I don't have problem with things being shot in China, but it was so obvious that they were saying, hey, we are making a shift where China will be more important than the American audience. And what do you get then with that? If the idea is, okay, this sort of has to make China happy and it has to make the woke elite happy, are you going to get something interesting, or are you just going to get a bunch of robots that nobody can see the difference between them bashing each other over the head? I mean, it's all why all of this sucks. And again, I would bring it back to music, because it's like, where is someone singing something that has some value? I watched this 2-part documentary on Netflix about Frank Sinatra. And if you haven't seen it, it's really, really wonderful. You don't even have to love Sinatra to appreciate it. But I think you'll love this particular part. There's a moment where, Sinatra was a lefty his entire life, and he was fighting against racism. And they talk about how, he would have black band members with him, and certain hotels wouldn't want them to, stay in the same floor or whatever. And he would fight against that. And he was really a great guy and a progressive in the true sense, because he was really a liberal. And then what happened was he met Ronald Reagan, who of course was the actor and then Republican governor of California. And once he went public with his friendship with Ronald Reagan, Sinatra went from being a media darling to hated by the media and being called a racist, and they were always going after him and his family and everything else. Does that sound a little familiar to you as to how the media treats people who have a little bit of an evolution? And I mention that because, you know, he wrote what my favorite Sinatra song is, My Way. The idea that, you know, regrets, you shouldn't have regrets. They got you there. I did it my way. I did it my way. And so few people are willing to do it their way. They just want to see what the system chokes out and follow it. And what that gets you is kind of what we got right now.